You're watching Opening Fairfield Doors, and I'm your host, Connie Boyer, and today my guest is Randy West, and we're going to open the door into Randy's background a little bit and way off Broadway. And thanks for coming, Randy.
Oh, thank you, Connie, for having me.
So, people need to understand your passion about musical theater and why it's such a delight here in Fairfield to have you. As far as I'm concerned, you are a hidden treasure in Fairfield.
Thank you. That's so
Although
kind.
you are well known and from some standpoint not hidden, but also I really want Fairfield to understand where your passion comes from and why it's important to Fairfield and actually Southeast Iowa.
Well, it's funny. I was raised in a sports family. That my dad was a he actually played professional baseball for one season, and then the war came out, and he went in the war, and he came back, and then he played AAA ball for a couple of years and didn't get called up. So he began coaching, and so he coached his whole life, and we ended up in a small town in Southern California, and I sang in church choir and school choir, and my best friend and I played drums in the instrumental music program. But I grew up just kind of a normal athletic life because that's kind of what I was raised doing, and I played all sports until I got into high school, and I played baseball in high school and college. But when I was in 8th grade, my best friend and I were in the junior high school band, and they came in for a community production of The Music Man, and they were looking for boys that looked young that could play an instrument to be the boys band in Music Man. And so my best friend said, well, I'll do it if you'll do it. And I said, okay. And so we raised our hand. And when they got us there, they found out that both of us could actually sing as well as play an instrument. So we got to be the little kids in Iowa Stubborn and Trouble. And so we were assigned parents, and we actually got to do quite a bit of just ensemble stuff in Music Man. And boy, I had never been initiated into musical theater. I didn't know that this thing existed, and it was the most fun I had ever had in my life. And literally in 8th grade, I went home and told my family that this is what I want to do with my life. And pretty early on, when I went into high school, the high school program was a good one at Hemet High School. And they did one big musical a year and sometimes a smaller musical. And I was able to, as a freshman, be in the big musical and do supporting text stuff and sell tickets and things. And I was the first ever freshman to become a thespian by the end of my first semester. I just did everything that I could do. And I just found this wonderful support in this. I loved doing theater, and I was really lucky because I had a family that supported it. And my dad, Norm, God bless him, I remember that when I was in high school, besides being a coach, my dad was the director of athletics in our school district, and so all the coaches were around our house. I'd grown up amongst all these coaches, and they would go to Dad, and they'd go, Norm, Randy's doing all this drama stuff. Are you worried about Randy doing all this drama stuff? And my dad would go, you know what? My son's happy. Are your kids happy? And that was the kind of support. God bless Norm, I have 2 younger sisters, and all 3 of us got theater degrees in college.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
My next youngest sister is both a high school theater teacher, and then she also teaches television. That they have a split program in theater and television. That I actually was lucky enough when I was in California to help her kind of build it's called the School of Film and Television, SOFT, at her school, and they win a bunch of awards, and it's actually kind of like the athletic program, that they have a trophy case for their film and television awards and a trophy case for their athletic awards. So that did it for me. I knew in high school, and my freshman year, I actually was asked to direct something that we did. We founded the Little Garage Theater, which they built a little theater out of a garage that we could use, and I directed little things there, and I continued to perform in the high school stuff. And then our senior year of high school, they decided to not do a musical, and we were crushed. And so at the time, I was the vice president of our Chamber Singers, which was our 26-voice advanced singing group, and we went back and said, can we do a musical on our own? And they said, well, if you want to. And it was a little like Mickey and Judy, you know, let's go put on a show. We didn't know, none of us were trained, none of us knew what we were doing. And I wrote a show called A Salute to the Swinging Years, and we used our jazz band to play 40 songs. We built a set that was a radio studio, and we all impersonated 1940s famous people and sang their songs. And it's funny because on Facebook, a whole bunch of us just posted pictures of us back in high school when we did that. And I guess that was the first thing that I actually directed that was a full. Of course, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was lucky enough that the head of the theater department at the University of Redlands, which was about 45 minutes away, Paul Little, heard about it and came over and saw this show, and he came up and said, you know, I think you should come to the University of Redlands, which is how I ended up at Redlands. I went to Redlands for 4 years as a musical theater major. It was one of the first schools to actually have a degree in musical theater, so I actually studied not only directing, but I studied conducting and I studied choreography. And so I can, with some of the WOB shows, I've actually conducted the orchestras. I can conduct, I can still choreograph. But I think it also just made me better when I work with anybody that I'm actually trained in those areas, that I can speak their language. And so I was lucky enough that in college, I was actually asked to direct 2 shows as an undergraduate in their main stage season. Time Out of Rhyme, which we just did last summer in its latest version. I wrote that, was my junior project in college, and Ken Helms, my best friend, it was his master's thesis. So I directed that at the main stage at the University of Redlands my junior year. And then my senior year, I was asked to direct a bigger show, and my minor was in children's theater. So when most people would be directing Death of a Salesman or The Crucible or something, I directed Wizard of Oz as my senior project at the University of Redlands, with about 35 little kids playing the Munchkins, and then my fraternity, the Brothers of Chi Sigma Chi, playing the Witches' Guards, and then a full cast. We had a cast of about 60, 65 in all the sets, and that was my senior project. And then I was just lucky that the guy that ran the musical theater program is a really incredibly gifted guy named Gary Krinke. Gary still directs a lot professionally, musical theater all over the world. But Gary had been at Redlands for 3 years, so I was mentored. I absolutely couldn't have directed a show my junior year or my senior year without being mentored by this wildly talented, caring guy. And Gary decided at the end of my senior year to not continue at Redlands. He got offered a job at Fullerton, and so he left Redlands. And they did a national search, and I can't tell you exactly why they didn't find somebody, but I was graduating in June, and I'd been offered a job in Santa Cruz in California to go be a high school theater teacher. And my thought was, at the time, UC Santa Cruz was right there. They had a program in musical theater. I thought I'd go work on my master's, and I'd teach high school at UC Santa Cruz. And then literally in June, I got a phone call from the head of the theater department there, Paul Little, saying, would I be interested in doing a combined position, doing some teaching the musical theater classes, directing the musicals, and inheriting a touring musical theater program, and then to round out a full-time schedule, also working in the admissions office as an admissions counselor, talking to students about the University of Redlands and speaking on behalf of liberal arts education. And I did that for 3 years. So I actually did, I taught musical theater and directed the musicals at Redlands, and literally, you know, I was 21. So, I mean, I had people that were older than me that I was teaching and directing. And then, I actually also became the assistant dean of admissions at the University of Redlands. And then I eventually ended up, they did a national search for a theater coordinator for the city of Phoenix, and it was a pretty big deal. I mean, that people knew that Phoenix was hiring a theater coordinator, and I just submitted my stuff, and they brought me over and they interviewed me, and I came back, and I was offered a job to go to Phoenix. And it's funny because this actually tracks all the way back to having an effect here in Fairfield, because when I was getting ready to leave to go to Phoenix, I'd done some national touring. I did a Godspell national tour, and I did a Pippin national tour, but I'd always lived in California. So I'd been out on the road, but I was always based, because my family is still in California. So I was leaving to move to Phoenix for the first time, going to live somewhere where I didn't have a bunch of family around me. And 2 or 3 students that I hadn't even had them right then, I'd had them the year before that, college students of mine, went to New York on their own to see shows, and while they were there, they knew that I was leaving to move to Phoenix. So entirely on their own, and only a college student would do this because, they don't understand that you don't do this. They called and they left a message at Stephen Sondheim's office that said when we were in college, we had this kind of crazed assistant professor of musical theater who taught your work, and he basically worshipped the ground on which you trod, and he's moving to Phoenix where he doesn't know anyone, and is there any chance that you could do something for his birthday? And Sondheim thought it was just funny enough that he actually called them in their hotel room and said, okay, tell me what this is about. And so about 3 days before my birthday, I was in Phoenix. I get on embossed stationery a little handwritten note that says, happy birthday to Randy West from Steve Sondheim. And I thought, wow, that's odd. And then on my birthday, I get this phone call, and I answer. I said, hello, and this voice said, hello, is this Randy West? And I said, yes, it is. And he says, hi, it's Steve Sondheim. And I said, I can't make up a reason why you'd be calling me. And he said, well, it's your birthday. I said, well, no, I know the birthday thing. It's the Steve Sondheim thing that's kind of amazing to me. And he said, I called you because I wanted you to know that these 3 students called me, and they said when you were teaching musical theater on the college level that you thought my work was so important that you really taught it in a way that gave it girth and importance culturally. And I said, oh my Lord, I said, you're iconic. I mean, you are contemporary musical theater to me.
And you actually thought it was him on the phone?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, but you didn't think, they're playing a joke on me?
Yeah, well, I should have, probably. That's how naive I am. And he's very sweet. I mean, he said, we talked for about a half an hour, and I said, I'd love to bring your newer stuff into Arizona, and that his older stuff had played there, but not his very fresh stuff. And so he gave me his home phone and his contact information, and over the next 5 years I did the Arizona premiere of the original Merrily We Roll Along and Follies and Sweeney Todd. And when I did, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. He gave me those numbers that were just recently added for Nathan Lane when he did the revival. I actually had him first in Phoenix, and he was very sweet, and I could call and say, I think this is what you meant when you wrote this. And usually he was very sweet, and he would say, well, we weren't exactly sure what we were thinking when we wrote it either, so probably what you're doing is fine. But what ended up being my last year there, I was doing an all-area premiere. Every show I was doing had never been done in the state before. And by then, I had done the original Merrily We Roll Along, and Merrily was not a success on Broadway. It played about 11 performances and closed, and it has a terrific Sondheim score in it. It was the books, mostly it was the book that was problematic. And they'd just taken it to the La Jolla Stage Company, and they'd done a workshop of it about 18 months ahead of when I contacted Steve. And everybody said a lot of good work was done on it. The show was originally done with really young people, like people in their 20s, and they have to age 40 years. And when they did it in La Jolla, they cast people in their 40s and they youthened them. And basically, there's a weird prejudice that we have in our culture that if you go to see 20-year-olds try to play 40-year-olds, you think, well, it's the college play. It's kids that are just too young trying to play old. But we're very used to having older people play younger. That's just kind of, we accept that more. So it was more professional when it was 40-year-old trained professional actors playing people that got younger. But they also did a lot of work on the show. And nothing had happened since then. I mean, that was John Rubinstein, headed that cast, and he's terrifically talented. And Jim Lapine, who was then collaborating with Steve, they'd already done Sunday in the Park with George and Into the Woods, came in and directed that with George Firth and Steve. So just on a fluke, I called Steve and I said, I know that this is probably, there's no way in the world that this could happen, but I'm doing this all premiere season. If there's any way I could do that workshop version of Merrily, it would be new. I did the original and it was successful, but this new one would be a premiere and I could do it in my season. It was also just, a huge ask because nobody was able to do that show. It just didn't exist. And I didn't really think I had a prayer of a chance. And he said, well, I will give you my personal new music manuscripts, but you need to get a hold of George Firth and see if it's okay with George to do the new book. And that's how I met George. And so Steve gave me his home phone, and I called George, and we talked on the phone. And it went back and forth for about 2 weeks, and then they called me, and they said, if you're willing to make your production the next workshop production of Merrily, and if we can come out there and work on it with you, then you can do it. And I said, wow, this is Phoenix, it's not New York, it's not LA. They said, no, we want to go somewhere safe. We want to go somewhere where the energy can be on the creative process, not on money. We don't want producers and economic choices driving creative forces. We want it to just really be about how can we make the musical better. And I said that I'd be thrilled, of course. I mean, I'd love to. And what I didn't know is that they were used to having the director be the third collaborator. So they actually invited me 6 months before I was going to direct it to start meeting with both of them. And we did a lot of work on the show. Actually, most of the changes in what is now the new version of Merrily came in that 6 months, and I learned more about musical theater and about Broadway and about, it was just, you couldn't pay for an education like that. And here I was with these two guys that are both just iconic and treating me like a colleague, and it was a thrill.
Tell who George Firth is, though,
Sure.
Because most people don't recognize his name, but if you tell a little bit about him or what he was in, people go, oh, yeah, I remember him.
George started out as an actor, and he was actually kind of all over at one point. George is the little guy Woodcock in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the clerk guy in the boxcar that they blow out of the train car twice. That's George Firth. In Blazing Saddles, he plays Van Johnson. Everybody's named Johnson in Blazing Saddles, and he's the one that when he grabs for his guns, they fall down around his legs. And he was in the Man with Two Brains. In the Batman series, he played the Penguin's assistant in one of the Adam West Batman. He was all over television in the late '60s and the '70s, and then he got an idea to write a play called Twigs, which was about relationships, and that got adapted into what became Company, which was Sondheim's really landmark first musical. Sondheim wrote the lyrics to West Side Story, and he wrote the lyrics to Gypsy, and he wrote the music and lyrics to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. But Company kind of was the first of the Sondheim concept musicals that redefined musical theater, and that was Hal Prince and George Firth, Hal Prince directing and producing, and Michael Bennett choreographing, and George writing, and Steve doing music and lyrics. And it was the first kind of quintessential New York musical. It sounded hip, it sounded like New York. It used an electric organ, and it had it was the first of the Jonathan Tunick orchestrations, which Jonathan Tunick would go on to orchestrate all of Sondheim's shows. And then if you just look at the '70s, boy, Sondheim did Company, and then he came right back and he did Follies, and then he did Pacific Overtures and Sweeney Todd and A Little Night Music, and that's all in just the '70s. And then going into the '80s, they did Merrily, which was a little bit of a failure, and it kind of broke the Hal Prince relationship. But George Firth wrote the book to Company, and he wrote the book to Merrily We Roll Along. He also wrote the book to the Liza Minnelli musical The Act, which was with a score by Kander and Ebb. He wrote regular plays that weren't musicals. He wrote Precious Sons. He wrote the supporting cast, and he wrote a one-woman musical that changed names many times. The first time I directed it, it was called Off the Record, and Doug Caceres, who's coming here this summer, was the composer of the one-woman show.
He was here before.
He was.
He's the one that played that trick on me.
He was.
Good.
So Doug and George wrote the one-woman show, which I directed with Judith Ivey, which was originally called Off the Record, and then it was changed to Music Minus One, and I directed it 2 years later with Gloria Loring. And then before we opened the Sondheim Center, when we just had the convention center, George came here with Doug, and they'd restructured that show into 3 women and 3 guys, and they called it Happy Hour. And I was able to direct that. Justin Hill musically directed locally, and Ryan Gaffney was in it. Tina Nelson, Diana Upton Hill, and my wife Margaret were the cast. And Doug and George came out, and we spent 2 weeks working on the show, and we performed 2 weekends. And it was funny because George seemed so alive. Didn't he just seem,
Yeah.
I mean, he was just this dynamic guy. And, and I knew George well enough that, he was one of those guys I could have said, George, you don't have any family. How'd you love to endow a theater company? And I could have had that. He would have either said yes or no.
Yeah.
But he was the kind of guy that I could have said that to. And he seemed so vital that I thought, let me go ahead and let Way Off Broadway found. I mean, let's have a real company, and then I'll go back and talk to George. And then that August, he just caught pneumonia and died.
Yeah.
I mean, he died in UCLA Medical Center right after we'd just gotten it. We'd actually founded the Sondheim Center, and we'd done our first spring, and we were just in the middle of our first summer when George died. But
well, let's hope that WOB gets an endowment at some point. And the Sondheim Center, that's in my mind all the time, that these two be endowed by some person that...
From your lips to God's ears.
That's right, exactly. And because, you know, Fairfield's unique in the fact that they have these two particular groups that are just... And they're helping each other, I think, and it's a good combination. And
our summer is a joint venture with the Fairfield Arts Convention Center, way off Broadway. We're working together in the whole summer doing the 3 summer musicals.
Great. So tell us about what shows you're going to do
Sure.
this summer.
This is our 5th summer coming back, and each year we've kind of try to find the right mix for the summer. And this year I sat down early on before we started with the board, and we had quite a long discussion about where are we going, what do we want to do, and we felt that we were doing a good mix of musicals that wouldn't get done in Fairfield if we didn't do them, as well as really well-known musicals, and a commitment to new musicals, that we felt we needed to keep that mix kind of in there. And we felt very strongly that, you know, the intern program has been such a success for us that we get really good press. I mean, I think solid press in Iowa, but a lot of stuff written about us in New York and California, that what we do with the training in the summer with those kids is stuff that they go away saying really changes them, that they go away with a different feeling about musical theater and about the profession. And so we knew we wanted to continue the intern program, and we have 15 great kids coming to spend the summer with us. 5 of them are from the Midwest, and 10 of them are from all over the country, which is, we try to keep about a third always from the Midwest, because there should be an advantage.
Right.
3 of them are from Fairfield. So,
oh, great.
So that's great.
Is there a program like this elsewhere in the country?
Somewhat. I mean, we're not the only one to run a professional musical theater mentoring program. I'd like to think that there's certain elements of ours that's unique. We're big and we're physical and we're integrated. I mean, we teach a certain style of musical theater that people think is kind of unique. But when in this meeting with the board, we said, you know, how should we grow this? And I spent a great year. My son Gareth is in 9th grade, and he was involved in the speech program and the speech competitions with the Kevin Hosbong and Fred Huckey and the teachers over there, and just had a great experience. And he's singing in the show choir with Zach Ryder, and of course many of the kids that we work with are involved in both Tina's middle school program and Scott's high school program, and you know, and of course, then Brendan Thomas and Matt Spear working out at MSAE are doing great things with those kids in theater and speech. And we said, what about if we really made more of an effort to invest in Fairfield? That we've always said that we wanted the intern program to benefit from our being in the Midwest, to have a third of the interns from the Midwest. But here we are in Fairfield. I mean, we are Iowa's, you know, only professional musical theater company, but we're also Fairfield's, you know, professional musical theater company. So we decided, what if, rather than just doing one musical this year with children in it, that we allow the opportunity for children in all 3 musicals? And what about, instead of just having middle school or high school slots in one musical, what about in all 3 musicals? And what about having some slots held out for not only ensemble, but some roles for adults in all 3 musicals? And so that was the first thing. What could we do that if somebody wanted to do just one musical, they could, but if somebody locally really wanted to invest in getting trained in musical theater, they could potentially do 2 or 3 musicals with us. And so we went there, and then while we were looking at that, the next thing was, what about, I mean, we're really getting into this Midwest thing, what if we do a whole summer of Midwest musicals? What about if every show has some tie to the Midwest? So we're using Fairfield, and we're using the local population and all ages, and what if the shows are Midwest based? So we looked at what were the options, and we made a list, and we said, well, you know, people keep asking us to do Music Man, and we haven't done it, and it's kind of the quintessential Iowa musical. It's not only about Iowa, it was written by an Iowan, and we hadn't done it, and it has roles for kids and young people and adults, and Adam who's coming back to choreograph Music Man with us. He choreographed the last national tour of Music Man with Shirley Jones, that time playing the mother as opposed to playing Marion. But so Music Man was a good show for him, and he just is coming off of, you know, his Anything Goes is still running in New York, that he choreographed with Kathleen Marshall, that won the Tony not only for Best Revival but for Best Choreography. So the fact that we have a big gun like Adam coming back to choreograph, going to work with all the local people and our interns, that we thought that's a great show for him, and it's a show he wants to do. And so I would direct. We got Sean McCall, who's a friend of ours. He's the artistic director at the Old Creamery. He played Hysterium when we did Funny Happened on the Way to the Forum. He has been dying to play Harold Hill. He played Harold Hill when he was in high school and hasn't done it professionally. So Sean is coming back to do Harold Hill. Ryan Gaffney, who's been with us on and off since we founded, is coming back to do Marcellus. Diana Upton Hill is coming in to do Marion. Tina Nelson is going to play the mayor's wife. And then we have just a whole bunch of, we'll use the interns. We have 50 locals that are rehearsing with us, from kids to middle school to adults that are building skills and learning musical theater stuff to be integrated into Music Man. And we're doing that. That opens Father's Day weekend. And then in July, we're doing Wizard of Oz, which takes place in Kansas. And what we decided to do with Wizard of Oz is, first of all, we are doing the whole Munchkin scene with kids, and it gives kids speaking roles. That in Music Man, there's a couple of kids that are principals, but most of the kids, they sing and dance and move around. We wanted to do a musical that actually had something that really featured the kids. And the whole Munchkin scene is you know, it's Dorothy, the two witches, and kids. And so they'll do all their own singing, they'll do all their own dancing. It's little kids and kind of through middle school kids playing that whole scene. And then what we wanted to do to make Wizard of Oz kind of put our own unique spin on it is, ever since we got the high definition projector and the rear screen projection screen for Hair, we don't do drops anymore. All of our shows have some form of multimedia. And so we decided that we wanted to, right now I'm kind of stepping back up into, besides doing musical theater, I'm back to doing more television and video work with Steve Schott and Ken Hoffmeister and Bob Lemlin. We're doing video commercials, and we're also doing video work. We decided, what if we created a movie section for the multimedia, so that we would have moving video with the characters. We'll green screen them, so Glinda will come in the bubble and be in moving video, and that'll the witch will be on the house moving and speaking in the video, so that parts of the movie that are kind of magical in the movie sense will still be a movie. And so it'll be the first time that we'll do an integrated musical where the characters go in and out of the movie screen and play in life, and then when they exit, they fly away into the so the flying monkeys will be in the movie thing. And we thought the wizard in the big movie thing, we thought that would be a fun way to upgrade the multimedia that we've been building on since we've been doing multimedia. And then Doug Caceros, in a fluke, called me and said, I got to work on a musical that I think is one of the best things I've ever worked on. And it's a true story. And the way our musical actually follows the 6 orphans who are put on an orphan train in New York and brought to Iowa. And I said, how serendipitous is that? I said, I'm looking for Midwest musicals, and you're making me aware of one. I said, send it to me. And it's based on the truth. From 1890 to 1920, 200,000 New York orphans were put on trains and sent to the Midwest, and Iowa took over 2,000. And so while these 6 kids are not by name tied to their families, they are based on true stories. So the events, and it's not sugar-coated. Things go really well for some of the orphans. Things don't go as well as it might go, which is kind of, there's this woman who is going to be played by Shannon Cochran for us, who is this 20-year-old woman who takes the orphans on the train, and she's kind of the heart of the musical. And when she sees things not work out for the orphans, she's just crushed and says, we can't send any more. And the Reverend, who's back in New York, who's in charge of the program, says, you know, we didn't promise them that it would be perfect. We promised them that have a chance. And if they stay in New York, they have no chance. So it's a really balanced story that way. And what was really astounding is this Broadway legend, Patricia Birch. This is her love project. This is something that she's really connected to. Patricia was the original Anybody's in West Side Story, the little Tom girl that's with the gang
wow.
in the movie and on Broadway. That's Patricia Birch. And then she choreographed Grease on Broadway, and she also choreographed the movie Grease. And then she directed Grease 2 and choreographed it. And she's got you should Google her, Patricia Birch, B-I-R-C-H. She's got a resume this long of major Broadway musicals. She's also done many movies. And today, I was just talking with Adam Cates about Music Man, and his partner, Steve, is a musical director. And he is musically directing a segment of Boardwalk Empire, which Patricia Birch choreographs, which is a show on Showtime. And they're rehearsing for 2 days, and then they're shooting tomorrow, and they're shooting the scene for Boardwalk Empire that Adam's partner is musically directing and playing the piano in the scene. Patricia Birch is choreographing it, and Stephen DeRosa, who played in our forum and also played our Captain Hook, is playing Eddie Cantor in this episode. He's going back. He did Eddie Cantor in the first season. So in one episode of Boardwalk Empire, there's a musical director that's a good friend of way off Broadway, Stephen DeRosa, and Patricia Birch is choreographing. And then she's coming here to direct and choreograph Orphan Train. She's going to work with all the local people, and we're bringing in the entire creative team. The writer will be here. Doug Caceres will be here. Sherry Rhodes, who's the vocal coach for the University of Iowa Opera program, is coming down to do the musical direction on this, and she'll do the vocal coaching and conduct the band. So really great. I should have mentioned Justin Hill is musically directing Music Man and Wizard of Oz. So a lot of great local people involved this summer. And so it's literally Music Man in June, Wizard of Oz in July, Orphan Train in August. And I am starting Saturday afternoons. I'm working one session with kids and one session with adults, just kind of teaching beginning dance steps so that when we gear up and start, which we start earnestly on Music Man May 28th, and then we open literally July 15th. So it's about 2.5 weeks when we put these shows together. I'm trying to teach the locals enough stuff that they get to do more, because we teach so fast that if you don't come in with a certain amount of skills, you can only learn what you can learn in a week and a half. And so I've got a great group of both kids and adults that are working with me over the weekend. And if you're interested in being involved, you can still get involved as a talent. We have young people as young as 7. And I think the oldest person we're working with, and I won't name his name, is in his late 60s. And a good mix of group, a lot of middle school kids, some high school kids, some college kids, some just people around town learning how to do musical theater. We've also got people that are committed to want to come in and help us with costumes or sets. We have this great group of interns that they'll be working with in the summer to do the tech stuff. If you want to just, do a party and host the interns to come over, we're going to do some stuff in the summer. We want to try to do a disco party for Wizard of Oz, because there was a disco album made at one point, and we thought it would be fun to just party with the Oz cast over in the convention center. So a lot of fun stuff going on. And if you aren't involved now and you want to be, you can call me. I'm Randy West, and my number is 641-919-0580. That's 919-0580. You can go to our website, which is www.wobroadway.com, or you can email me directly, and it's rwest for Randy West, rwest@wobroadway.com. So if you ever thought you might want to get involved in musical theater, this is the chance to do it. And the last thing I should tell you is, in the middle of all this, besides just really increasing the community involvement, what we decided to do is basically in the mornings, the interns either have technical assignments, or that's when we do workshops and seminars. Adam, when he's here, he teaches a 1-hour dance workshop every day for an hour that people that are really strong dancers to people that don't dance at all have gotten so much out of this class, because it's a master class that he teaches in New York. He teaches it in Canada, and while he's in residence with us, he teaches an hour class 5 days a week.
Now, is that class just for the interns or anybody?
That's what I'm getting to. This year, for the first time ever, I mean, not only Adam's classes, but everybody who comes in to work with the interns teaches how to survive in the professional theater. I teach how to audition for musical theater. I teach on-camera acting so that they have an exposure to be able to maybe do television and film stuff to support their musical theater stuff. Sean will teach while he's here. Margaret teaches in the summer. All of that education, along with the musical theater training, which has been the core of the intern program, our board decided we should make that available to anybody in Fairfield that wants access to what it is we do that's unique. So this summer, there's no grades. I mean, it's not an academic program, it's a mentoring program. It's teaching performing skills and performing survival skills. We teach the difference between an agent and a manager. We teach how do you need to be able to market yourself. And then these college students or these young people, they spend 12 weeks and do 3 musicals, and by the end of that, you can get a pretty good feeling for the fact that this is the only thing I want to do with my life. I mean, I desperately want to spend my life doing this. Or some of them by the summer go, you know what? I want to teach. I want to teach, and that's an honorable subject. I mean, my dad was a teacher, my sister's a teacher, that's great. But performing is hard. Performing is a really hard lifestyle, and about 3/4 of our people by the end of the summer say there's nothing else I want to do on the planet but continue to do this. And probably about 1/4 say, you know what, this was fun, but I don't need to do this for the rest of my life. And that's basically what the colleges asked us to do when we were asking what could we do to augment a college program. And so this year, anything we do is open to anybody in Fairfield that wants to attend, and there's no charge.
So some of what you're doing there, they're not getting that college experience doing those things.
What some colleges claim they do everything, but there are colleges that basically say that they would tell you, every university or college that's a good college is going to tell you that they do a good job teaching their performers to sing, dance, and act, because that's what they go there to do. But such a substantial percentage of their students are going to teach, that what they do is they think they do a really good job of teaching them their discipline and then teaching them how to teach that discipline. But for many colleges, such a small percentage are really interested in a professional life. I mean, actually going out and trying to earn a living performing, that they touch on it, but they don't create an environment that has that intensity, and they don't teach those just survival skills. Because I mean, even in a college program, they take 8 to 9 or 10 weeks to do a musical. They don't do it in 2.5, 3 weeks. Right. I mean, so when I was calling around saying, you know, and this was in the early stages, what can we do? They said, you know, if you can put them in an environment that simulates a real environment, run it with real hours. We work on a schedule that mimics a union schedule. We work 6 days a week. You get Monday off. That's exactly what you get in New York. We mimic the amount of hours. We mimic the amount of breaks. And, you know, some people just thrive in this. And, you know, young people find out that they can learn a musical in a week. Yeah. And they didn't necessarily know that before they got here. And by the end of the summer, they learn the musical in a week, and then we tech it for a week, and then we open it. I mean, because that's basically how it works. It's all new stuff. Every day you're learning new stuff for about 7 to 9 days. And then the last part of the process is, okay, how do we put sets and lights and stuff around this and then do it in front of people? And by the time you've done that 3 times in the summer, you walk out of here going, I did something that I didn't even know I could do. And you can tell. You asked me about the thrill of this. I don't take a single day, an hour, a minute for granted that I get to do this for a living. I mean, my dad was a very successful baseball coach and was offered many times a chance to coach at the college or university level. And at least with baseball, my dad, that younger athletes, if he could really affect people in high school and make a difference for how many of them would go on to play in college. And he felt by the time you were in college, you were somewhat cooked. I mean, you had to be at a certain level or you wouldn't play at college. And he could increase how many young people could play in college at the high school level. There's a bigger growth potential. Well, I inherited just his looking at potential, and I look at potential from everything from the small kids that we have to the middle school kids to the high school kids to the interns to the people in town. And literally all I see is potential. And I sit down and I say to them that, you know, whether or not we're paying you or not to be in this, I still feel that there's a covenant that's made between a creative staff and a cast. You're giving up your free time. You are deciding to not do everything else in your life for a period of time to do this thing, which happens to be musical theater. You should walk out changed by that. And if you have 15 people in a room, what they want to learn or how they want to come out different might be 15 different scenarios. I want to be more comfortable in front of people. I want to be physically more in contact with my body. Maybe I really want to build musical theater skills. There's many ways that the performing arts touch it. And you know, speaking of, you know, the performing arts in the schools, there's study after study that says that kids that perform in the performing arts do better in school. I mean, it just connects you to feeling good about yourself and confident in yourself, and that translates into legitimate academics, even though in the summer we're not teaching that.
Yeah. That's fabulous.
Oh, it's a thrill.
Well, Randy, we could just sit here and talk forever. So we'll have to have you back.
My pleasure.
And
maybe sometime in the summer we could run some interns in here and get you to talk to them about where they came from and why they're here.
That'd be a great idea, and we could get to know some of them. And I think it's great that you're really putting them in an environment where they learn, is this really the lifestyle that I want to live? Because it is a lifestyle.
It is.
If they really want to be a performer versus being a teacher at a high school or a teacher at a college, it's a whole different gig. So, yeah, they're going to learn that.
Absolutely.
So it's fabulous. It's a great, I mean, I just can't say enough about the program. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And, we really appreciate what you're doing and your enthusiasm for everything. It's infectious.
Thank you.
So
come get involved. If you're not involved now and you have an interest, we are the easiest company to engage. I mean, there's not a scary thing. We ease you in, and I think that when I talk to people about directing, I think you should be nurtured in your performances, not scared into your performances. So don't be afraid to come get to know Way Off Broadway.
Great. Thanks, Randy.
My pleasure.